The liberals have lost the war, and Colonel Aureliano Buendía, along with his friend Colonel Gabriel Márquez, is captured and sentenced to execution by firing squad. His last request is that the sentence be carried out in his hometown of Macondo. He is saved at the final instant, however, by his brother José Arcadio, and immediately Colonel Buendía launches another uprising, one of 32 he will lead during his military career. He encounters a long string of failures, however, and is abandoned by the Liberal Party's official representatives. Eventually, though, he enjoys some success and is able to recapture Macondo and other coastal territory. But an assassination attempt leaves him disillusioned with the constant fighting, and he begins to realize that he is fighting not for ideology, but for pride alone. He starts writing poetry again, as he used to do during his courtship with Remedios Moscot. While Aureliano is fighting his wars, Santa Sofía de la Piedad gives birth to twins fathered by her dead husband, Arcadio. They are named José Arcadio II and Aureliano II. Apart from this happy event, however, tragedy strikes the Buendía family repeatedly. José Arcadio dies mysteriously, and it is unclear whether he has been murdered or has committed suicide. Rebecca, his wife, becomes a hermit, living the rest of her life in solitary grief. Colonel Gabriel Márquez, who is left in command of the town when Aureliano leaves yet again to fight, has been in love for years with the solitary Amaranta, who spurns him as she did Pietro Crespi. And finally, after years of living outside tied to a tree, José Arcadio Buendía, the patriarch of the clan, dies. A rain of yellow flowers from the sky marks his death. Time passes, and Aureliano José, the son of Colonel Aureliano Buendía and Pilar Ternera, grows to maturity. He develops an unhealthy passion for his aunt, Amaranta, which she, in her loneliness, comes dangerously close to requiting. The two touch each other and sleep naked together without ever having intercourse. When they are almost discovered kissing, however, Amaranta breaks off the affair and Aureliano José joins the army. The official Liberal Party signs a peace agreement with the Conservative government, an agreement that Colonel Buendía sees as treacherous. He repudiates the agreement and flees the country, and Aureliano José goes with him. While Colonel Aureliano is traveling throughout the Caribbean, starting liberal uprisings, Macondo settles into relative peace, thriving in its new status as a municipality under the mayor José Raquel Moncada, who is a conservative but also a humane and intelligent man. Aureliano José deserts the rebel army and returns home, hoping to marry Amaranta, who continues to avoid him, repelled by the notion of incest. The situation is brought to a tragic close when Aureliano José is killed by a conservative soldier during an act of civil disobedience. Soon after Aureliano José's desertion, the 17 sons, whom Colonel Aureliano Buendía has fathered over the course of his travels, are brought to Macondo to be baptized, and all are given the name Aureliano. Not long after Aureliano José's death, the colonel himself returns to Macondo as the head of an army. Tall and pale, Colonel Aureliano Buendía has been hardened by his many battles. When a court-martial orders that José Raquel Moncada be put to death, he refuses to commute the sentence, despite the long-standing friendship between the two soldiers and the protests of all the town's matriarchs. The execution of Moncada is the beginning of the end. Colonel Gabriel Márquez and then Colonel Aureliano Buendía himself lose faith in the purpose of the war. Gabriel Márquez devotes himself instead to Amaranta, who steadily rebuffs his protestations of love, even as she becomes more and more used to his presence. Withdrawn into himself, Colonel Buendía becomes a shell of a man, unemotional and utterly solitary, without any memories. It is only when Gabriel Márquez is condemned to death that Colonel Buendía is forced to confront himself, finally acknowledging the emptiness of the war. Together with the freed Colonel Gerineldo Marquez, he fights the bloody battles against his own forces in an effort to convince the liberals, at last, to end the war. When he signs a peace treaty that he feels represents the Liberal Party's failure to uphold their ideals, he thinks that he has betrayed both himself and his party. He attempts suicide, but survives the bullet wound in his chest. When Ursula, his mother, sees that he will live, she makes an effort to rejuvenate the house and to rescue it from the creeping decay that descended on it during the war. Colonel Aureliano Buendía has withdrawn even further from society, spending his days locked in his workshop, making tiny golden fishes and refusing to speak about politics. Meanwhile, in his adolescence, Aureliano II begins to delve into the esoteric mysteries still preserved in Melquiades's laboratory. He is often visited by the spectre of Melquiades himself. José Arcadio II, Aureliano II's twin brother, on the other hand, begins to show a religious side. Soon, however, he becomes a cockfighter and sometimes engages in sex with donkeys. The two brothers, who share a strong resemblance until they are fully grown, both start sleeping with the same woman, Petra Coates, who does not realize that they are not the same man. When José Arcadio II is scared off by a venereal disease contracted from Petra Coates, he ends all contact, while Aureliano II decides to stay with her. The two have a fierce passion for each other, and something magical in their union causes their farm animals to be supernaturally fertile. Soon, Aureliano II becomes fabulously wealthy by virtue of his livestock's productivity. He throws huge parties and engages in colossal displays of wealth. The whole village seems to share in his prosperity. Driven, like his great-grandfather José Arcadio Buendía, by the impulse to explore, José Arcadio II tries to engineer a navigable river passage to the ocean. He is successful only once in bringing a boat up the river. In his boat are a group of French prostitutes who promote a huge carnival in Macondo. Remedios the Beauty is declared queen of the carnival. She has become the most beautiful woman anyone has ever seen, but still she remains blissfully ignorant and totally innocent, like a child. At the carnival, however, disaster strikes. A rival queen, Fernanda del Carpio, arrives, escorted by mysterious men who begin a riot and then begin firing rifles into the crowd, killing many revelers. The chapter begins by providing us with a history of Fernanda del Carpio. She is raised to believe she is destined for greatness, but her family's wealth has been fading and her aristocratic line is dying. Upon seeing her at the carnival, Aureliano II becomes obsessed with her, tracking her down in her gloomy city and carrying her home to marry him. Their personalities, however, clash. She is religious and haughty, while he is a devoted hedonist. Scorning his wife's rigid moral and social code, Aureliano II continues to sleep with Petra Coates, both to ensure the fertility of his animals and because of his wife's prudishness in bed. Meanwhile, Fernanda attempts to transform the once relaxed Buendia house into a facsimile of her aristocratic home. She rules with an iron hand, and the house becomes rigidly formal and unpleasant. Despite their estrangement, Aureliano II and Fernanda have 2 children early in their marriage: Renata Remedios, whom everyone calls Meme, and José Arcadio II. Ursula, the 100-year-old matriarch of the clan, says that José Arcadio will become pope. Soon after the birth of Meme, the anniversary of the armistice that ended the civil war occurs, and the President of the Republic tries to honor Colonel Aureliano Buendía with the Order of Merit, which he declines scornfully. His 17 illegitimate sons, each named Aureliano, arrive at Macondo to celebrate the anniversary, and Aureliano II greets their arrival with revelry, much to Fernanda's consternation. When the 17 Aurelianos receive the cross of ashes on their foreheads on Ash Wednesday, they do not wash off, and all 17 brothers keep the mark until their deaths. One of the sons, Aureliano Triste, discovers that Rebecca, the widow of José Arcadio Buendía's son, José Arcadio, is still living as a hermit in her house. Aureliano Triste and another of the Aurelianos, Aureliano Centeno, decide to remain in Macondo and build an ice factory there, in a sense fulfilling José Arcadio Buendía's early prophecy of a town made of ice. Finally, funded by Aureliano II, Aureliano Triste builds a railroad connection, decisively linking Macondo with the industrial modern world. The influx of modern technology that arrived in Macondo with the railroad is amazing and troubling to the citizens of the now thriving village. But doubly confusing is the arrival in Macondo of foreign capitalists who establish a banana plantation in the village and set up their own fenced-in town right next to Macondo. Macondo rapidly becomes more cosmopolitan. The cinema, phonographs, luxury imports, and more prostitutes arrive in the town. It is a time of chaos and uncontrolled growth in Macondo, and Aureliano II is overjoyed by the overflowing energy. The only person who remains unexcited is the ethereal Remedios, the beauty, who seems blissfully unaware of the changes going on around her. She is unaware, too, that her beauty is deadly and that men die for the sin of loving her. In fact, she remains unconcerned with love and with men throughout the novel and seems unworldly until one day she floats off the ground and up to heaven, disappearing forever. With capitalism running rampant in Macondo, Colonel Aureliano Buendía begins to repent his decision to end the war against the conservatives, who are facilitating the rise to power of the foreign imperialists. The wealthy banana plantation owners set up their own dictatorial police force, which brutally attacks citizens for even the slightest offenses. Colonel Buendía's threat to start a war with his 17 sons as soldiers results in tragedy. Unnamed assassins track the boys down and kill all but one of them, shooting them in the crosses that are indelibly marked, like targets, on their foreheads. Colonel Buendía falls into a deep depression and visits Colonel Gerineldo Márquez in an attempt to start another war, but Colonel Márquez rebuffs him. Ursula, meanwhile, has grown very old and notices that time is passing more quickly now than it did in the old days. She's going blind, but no one notices because she always knows where everyone is according to his or her daily routine. Ursula is driven by a dedication to José Arcadio II becoming Pope. Nevertheless, she is deeply sad at all the tragedy that has befallen the family. When José Arcadio II goes away to seminary and Meme to school, the house becomes even emptier. Amaranta starts weaving her own shroud in preparation for death. Fernanda del Carpio gains increasing domestic control and tries again to impose her harsh religious discipline on the household. As a result, Aureliano II moves into the house of his concubine, Petra Coates, carrying his revelry to new heights. On one occasion, he almost kills himself in an eating contest with a woman known as the Elephant. In the absence of the children, the house becomes grim and ghostly quiet. When Meme comes home from school, however, Aureliano II comes home from Petra Coates's to play the part of a father. When she brings home 72 guests from school one vacation, however, it becomes clear that she has inherited her father's propensity toward reckless abandon. Eventually, the solitary and enigmatic José Arcadio II reappears around the house to talk with the old colonel. But the colonel does not respond well, and instead withdraws even further into himself. Incapable of deep emotion and longing for some concrete memories of his past, the solitary old man drifts further toward death. He stops making new fish out of gold, which is his one constant hobby, and instead makes only a few fish before melting them down to start all over again. Finally, one morning, he passes away.